Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, July 10th, 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Volkswagen plans to cut its model lineup by up to half. Toyota's move out of Mexico is rattling the country's entire auto sector. And the nation's top auto safety regulator says steering wheels may not belong in driverless cars. Plus, Cox Automotive's Erin Keating says the affordability crisis isn't quite what you think it is, and dealers may be sitting on a bigger profit opportunity than they realize.
Put them in the right car that gets them to where they want to go. Ask them, do they really need that third row, right? Ask them if they really need the height.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Volkswagen Group is planning to slash its roughly 150 model lineup by up to half and cut production capacity from 10 million vehicles a year to 9 million. The move comes as the automaker faces eroding profits from Chinese competition, U.S. tariffs, and high costs at home. Those factors helped cut profit margins in half between 2021 and 2025. But analysts from Bloomberg Intelligence and Bernstein say the plan is short on specifics, and VW's own supervisory board voted down a deeper restructuring proposal 12-7. Toyota's decision to move Tacoma production from Mexico to Texas is sending shockwaves through the Mexican auto industry, and it may just be the start. With President Trump opting for annual USMCA reviews instead of a long-term renewal, automakers are now reviewing backup plans, trimming output, and rethinking plant expansion deals. Mexico's auto sector accounts for 4.5% of the country's GDP, and the uncertainty isn't going away. And the nation's top auto safety chief says his agency absolutely will consider ending requirements that driverless cars include steering wheels. NHTSA Administrator Jonathan Morrison made the comments in a CNBC interview Wednesday, saying it doesn't make any sense to require manual controls on vehicles never meant to be driven by a human. It follows NHTSA's move last month to drop the mandate for manual brake pedals in autonomous vehicles, a regulatory shift that could clear the way for robotaxis like Tesla's Cybercab. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Infiniti is back in the conversation, and our own Urvaksh Karkaria has been writing about why the QX65 might be the most important new model the brand has launched in years. He joins me now to talk about it. Urvaksh, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. So, the article that you wrote is titled, Why the QX65 is Infiniti's Most Important Model of 2026. So why is that, Urvaksh?
Yeah, so the QX65 fits into the sweet spot of the market, which is mid-size crossovers. It's a two-row mid-size crossover that complements Infiniti's three-row mid-sized QX60. So it's kind of a high-volume model. It's expected to be the number 2 seller for the brand after the QX60. The difference between the QX65 and the QX60 is essentially the third row. So it's kind of aimed at empty nesters, either the younger age range or the older age range, that basically need all the capability and sportiness and luxury of a mid-sized QX60, but they don't need that extra row of seats. So the vehicle basically started arriving in stores in May, towards the end of May. So June was the first full month. And essentially they've sold a little over 1,000 units in June. I believe it's like 1,019 units. And they were expecting, about 800 units. So it's a 25% increase over what they had targeted. By fall, they expect to be selling about 1,500 to 1,800 QX60s monthly. So they definitely are seeing significant traction for this model. Part of the excitement, obviously it's a new model, but part of the excitement is also because Infiniti just has two other models. So, it's not like this is a new model to a 12 model lineup. So there's very little to pick from. So every addition is interesting and exciting for Infiniti loyalists. And then the momentum is expected to sort of continue or build into 2027 when Infiniti will bring a more popular V6 option to the QX60 next summer. And obviously 41%, according to Edmunds, 41% of luxury midsize crossovers are basically V6s. So Infiniti can expect or hope to expect the QX65 to continue to be an important part of the lineup until additional models come. So starting in, I believe, 2028, or actually next year, they're going to get a Q50 sedan, and then that'll be followed by 3 crossovers, which will be based on the Nissan platforms. So really, the QX65 is sort of at the vanguard of a significant update or increase in Infiniti's lineup, which will go from 2 models at the start of this year to 7 by the end of the decade.
Is this the shot in the arm that Infiniti needs as a brand?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Infiniti has had declining sales for several years, at least post-pandemic. It's got some traction in recent years, but it's the year-over-year sales are still struggling. Again, part of the problem is that the lineup has shrunk. Last year alone, they lost, I believe, 2 or 3 models, the QX50, the QX55 crossovers, due to tariffs. They were built in Mexico. So the lineup has shrunk, which means the dealers have less throughput. Dealer profitability is still, half of what it was last year, the first half of this year versus first half of last year. Dealership profitability is half. So, both the brand as well as its dealers need the new product and sort of the pricing support that brings.
Urvaksh Kakaria joining us from Atlanta. Really appreciate it, Urvaksh, and excited to see where the story goes.
Thanks again. Have a good weekend.
Coming up, Cox Automotive's Erin Keating talks about why she says the affordability story is more complicated than the headlines suggest and what dealers should be doing about it right now. That's next on Daily Drive.
Grid demand today is unprecedented. And this week on Shift, we're digging into how GM Energy is building new technology to meet that demand.
GM Energy Chief Revenue Officer Asim Kapoor talks about the technology the General Motors subsidiary is piloting to improve grid stability.
In the future, the energy companies would be able to draw energy from or power from the batteries to be able to balance the grid. And that can be, very significant in terms of improving grid stability and reliability going forward.
Kapoor also talks about GM Energy's partnership with Redwood and how EV battery recycling can help make battery materials more sustainable.
Join us for Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. Erin Keating is an executive analyst at Cox Automotive who focuses on consumer behavior, dealership economics, and market trends. She sat down with Automotive News senior retail editor Dan Shine at Cox Automotive's mid-year report event to talk about why the sticker shock on new vehicles isn't the whole story, how safety ratings became a stealth driver of vehicle prices, and why fixed operations may be the most under-leveraged profit engine at dealerships today.
Talked a little bit about affordability. You were kind of puncturing the holes. Everybody thinks that cars are too expensive.
Yep.
But you say, not so fast.
Yeah, not so fast. I mean, look, we know that the average transaction price puts a little bit of a sticker shock, a little bit of a sting in everyone's mouth, when they hear that price, $50,000. But what I explained in the Make Your Review is that the car is not necessarily to blame. I mean, surprisingly enough, the car has in fact gotten so much better for us over 10 years and only was, under a $500 differential from what it would be CPI adjusted inflation over 10 years. So bravo to the automakers for giving us better cars, safer cars, and actually keeping pace with inflation.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You also talked about kind of the impact of the IIHS.
Yes.
And how it's really shaped the vehicles that we drive today. Explain more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a panel with the DOT and NHTSA back a couple of months ago out in Toronto, and sat on the stage with Mazda and GM, and it really got me thinking because, of course, I had to talk about affordability in the framing of safety and such. And when I was doing my research, I thought, well, what's really mandated? And there's so little of the technology that's currently on a car that's actually federally mandated for homologation in the U.S. Where the attention should really be sort of focused is the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, because they have so long been trusted as the place to go to find out, is your car reliable? Is it safe? Should you be looking at other brands because they have a higher rating, et cetera, et cetera? And that has ingrained that thought process for consumers where they continue to say to themselves, well, wait a minute, I want a reliable car. I want it to be really safe. What features did they say again were on those cars? Okay, fine. And now that's become their customer expectation. Whereas who would sell an unsafe vehicle?
It's a marketing opportunity.
It's absolutely a marketing opportunity. And insurance companies have obviously paid attention and they adjust their rates based on what technology you have on your car. Automakers hear that. Why wouldn't they design, to get to that top safety rating? Because it's now really important. So it makes sense that all of these additional features that aren't mandated by law become customer expectations. And guess what they come with? A price tag to build them into the vehicles.
Yeah. You also talked about some of the add-ons that consumers want in their vehicle. I was driving out here just now, and the press vehicle that I'm driving did not have Apple CarPlay, which is...
We won't mention names, right?
No, but it was, I'm like, okay, this guy. I can speak a little bit to on the consumers and what they are looking for from their vehicles. What like an Apple CarPlay.
Right. Or stolen vehicle alerts, passenger assist programs within the vehicle, lane assist programs, et cetera, et cetera. So we saw just this enormous propensity for customers to want all of this added technology. And yet when we said, well, hey, if we could line item those for you and you could pick which ones you want, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And hands down, each category, you showed this cliff that they fell off of, who was willing to actually pay for that benefit, even though they expected it to be standard.
Yeah. You brought up an interesting, which I thought of as well. Are subscriptions a possibility? You don't want lane deviation? Okay, I'll pay an extra whatever for that. I want Apple CarPlay. Yes, I'll pay whatever for that. Is that something that we may see down the road from automakers?
I think this is where automakers people don't understand the conundrum they get inside of, right? Because you'll have plenty of consumers who will say, no, really, give it to me and give me the optionality and let me decide what I want to buy. And I guarantee you that person walks out of the dealership going, dang, didn't I just order 10 extra things on my car? And boy, did they get me, Yeah. And yet, if you were to probably compare that back to what would it have cost if you had just let it be packaged into the original vehicle, you probably would have paid less, right?
Yeah.
But, so the question would be, are people subscription fatigued? Are they wanting the optionality, but customers want a lot, do a lot differently. So some of the automakers may go into experimentation, especially around packaging of different technologies. There was seat warmers and things like that that came into play, power options and things like that. I think when it comes to the safety and the advanced technology, they're probably still going to struggle getting that customer to wrap their head around how much would it pay. Now, if they offer the subscription maybe upfront, hey, you can pay it for 3 years in a row, perhaps that will help them, although we saw Tesla just go backwards on that. So it will be an interesting experiment. Some manufacturers have said that they want to look into it. How many actually come to market with that after doing some testing with customer focus groups remains to be seen.
Getting back to affordability a little bit, another myth, there is no such thing as an affordable new car these days. Right. But you say, again, not so fast.
Not so fast. We talked about the Hyundai Venue. Like, this is the cheapest vehicle in America right now at around $22,000. And when we rewind that back to 2016 numbers, turns out to be just under $16,000. So yeah, we might have done away with some of the sedans, but we've turned people over to compact SUVs, subcompact SUVs. And so when we just put things in perspective and look at what normal inflation would have taken us to this point, we do still have the floor of vehicles that are available at less expensive prices. They just seem more expensive because, honestly, people only go back to buy a new car every 3 to 5 years. Whoa, does that differential feel different? Yep. They're not sitting there going, this is how much more I'm making 5 years later, too, right? What consumer wants to admit that differential, right?
Yep, right.
The mind will speak what the mind wants to think, yeah.
Yes, right. We talk about car payments. And again, car payments, if again, adjusted for inflation, haven't really changed much over the years. What has is interest rates.
Interest rates.
That's the killer. How do they impact? And we just have the Fed keep rates steady, and there's talk about maybe raising rates.
Right.
How big a role does that play in,
Right.
in what people pay for their car?
Well, I mean, remember with the Fed fund rate, that doesn't necessarily lead us quickly to what automotive rates will do, because they do function more as a matter of how they fund their loans. However, rates have played a significant impact. I mean, they've gone from, say, an average of 6.5% to 9.5%. That adds a tremendous amount of load onto the actual monthly payment. And, one of the things I recently looked at is we've seen loan terms over 72 months at an all-time high, 30% of them. So imagine the consumer sitting there looking and they say, okay, if I do a regular 48 month, I could get the car for, I don't know, call it $1,000 a month, and I'd only pay, call it $8,000 over the term of the lease or the loan in interest. Yeah. They're willing to go all the way up to, say, $13,000 extra in interest rates just to get their monthly payment down to $700.
Yeah.
So the consumer is actually taking on added expense just to get those monthly payments down, and that added expense is coming from interest. Yeah. And that's the real driver.
So for dealers, what's the lesson for them about affordability? I mean, it seems like you can make that argument, like that they could make an argument to consumers. Cars haven't really gone up as much as you think they have. What can dealers do to kind of combat this feeling of affordability problems?
Sure. I mean, I think, first of all, definitely take a look at your financing options. Make sure that you have a really good, strong portfolio of financing options for meeting your customers where they are. So that's a natural thing that they can at least control. Secondly, when you're looking at advertising and marketing, really looking into maybe bringing that message forward. Hey, look, the car you got 10 years ago, look at what it's now. Really talking about the value of the increase and how much better that car is today. Really talking about what have some of the advances been and why has that contributed to the cost of the vehicle. Maybe even using our data to show, look, hey, it really hasn't gone much higher over the course of the time, considering what you're getting now.
Right.
Always, if you have that broad appeal to the market, if you have brands like the Hyundais, the Toyotas, the Hondas, who really stretch their portfolio across all segments, put them in the right car that gets them to where they want to go. Ask them, do they really need that third row, right? Ask them if they really need the height. These things can matter.
Yeah. I spoke a little bit earlier with Chief Economist Jeremy Robb, and we talked about sales and new vehicle sales being kind of where they are, and this K-shaped economy where there's just a lot of people left out of the marketplace who are hanging on to their vehicles.
Sure.
Which leads me, I always want to talk service parts with you whenever possible. We see the added importance of the role of how fixed operations at a dealership. How do you see the fixed ops going so far in the first half of this year, and the importance that play in the revenue health of a dealership?
I mean, hands down, it's been one of the most discussed topics of the year. If affordability is pretty high up there, I think fixed ops is the next thing that everyone's hearing as a frequent word in our industry, and dealers are laser focused on it. Not only because they know it's a profit engine, but because they know they've been leaking those customers to the independent shops over the years. They've just been handing that business away by not paying attention to how to connect sales to service, how to, feed that virtuous cycle, getting vehicles in and figuring out how do we be more transparent in the repair and maintenance process? How do we think more clearly about communicating pricing, length of time, getting people in immediately? And then how do we think about using that client as a potential trade-in? How do we get them introduced to sales? And so, the interesting flywheel that service can really behave as shocks me maybe that it hasn't been leveraged more often in dealership business, especially at a time like this, to your point, where we have cars that are significantly older. And some of those folks may have been feeling, trepidation about coming back into the market because of all these volatile spikes in news headlines and such. Well, we've now kind of flattened out on the headlines, right? They're coming still every day, but if we look at the prices and the information it's giving us that cars really are going up and down that much. Go ahead and get in. Right? Yeah. You've been hanging on to that car for 10 years. Let us help you service it, maintain it. But then also, if you're ready for the trade-in, let's offer the trade-in values. Let's pay close attention to how much you're going to pay for that repair. And then they can flip that car into a used car, which they desperately need as well.
Yeah. And also, I think that with fix ops is there may be more, I guess we've written a lot at Automotive News about, you talk about losing the quick lube, the business, their independents are taking away their business. And the thing is, again, getting back to affordability, price. It's always a consumer. That's the number one thing is price. How do dealers combat that? You talked a little bit about transparency. I don't know if it's menu pricing, or maybe say, we might be a little more expensive than the mom and pop shop down the street, but here's what you get for your
Sure.
maybe extra $100 on the repair.
Well, I would say first and foremost, double check your math. Are you more expensive? Because a lot of the times that's customer perception. It's not necessarily reality.
Yeah.
So have someone who is focused on doing market research where you are and in your areas for service,
Yeah.
and figure out where are you possibly more expensive, maybe even sometimes less expensive, depending. And then put that forward, make some changes and adjustments, either on your marketing materials and how you talk about service pricing, or how transparent you are when the customer comes in, and or adjust pricing where it makes sense because it's business that you just shouldn't be losing, right? So, I think market intelligence there becomes really, really important. But then furthermore, to your point, play up the value of coming back to the manufacturer's dealership, right? Especially with all the modern cars, with all the sensors, with all the calibrations that are needed. These are the folks that have the technicians that have been fully trained, the tooling to actually address those vehicles and so forth. So I think that there's a lot of sort of, just ABCs of what they can be doing to increase, transparency with the customer and leveraging all the digital tools that are available to them today.
Now, one final question, and kind of maybe jumped in my head when you were talking, and that's right to repair.
Yeah.
It's been around for a while.
Sure.
Just kind of made it into the Oval Office, and there was some discussion there about it. There seems to be good support. There always seems to be support, but it never seems to go anywhere. Is this a big deal? Should dealers care about this? Should manufacturers care about whether this gets passed or not gets passed?
So, I'm not a policy expert, so I'm not going to wade too deeply into it. But if I anecdotally talked about it, I think the issue that's at heart, even though I know Trump made that comment, it looks like you guys just don't want people to repair their vehicles. I don't think that's the case. I think that there's real important discussions being had around privacy, around data. We just have to acknowledge we have cars that are more and more software defined, which are collecting more and more analytics and data. And that's incredibly important. And consumers should care that it's incredibly important that we maintain at least responsibility and vision into how that data is being leveraged and used. So I do think that that's a rightful angle for them to be thinking about as they're evaluating. Do we want to let the data out freely? Now, granted, some people would say you could solve that with contracts or, this, that, and the other thing, and maybe they will. But ultimately, I think that's really at the base of it. I wish that would be a little bit more of the focus of it rather than saying that people just don't want people to repair their cars. Is there some underlying competitive nature of franchise dealerships wanting to keep that business? Sure. But underlying, we should all be concerned about what's happening with the massive amount of data that is being collected by our car.
Erin, always great to talk with you.
Yes,
Thanks for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
Cox Automotive Executive Analyst Erin Keating spoke with our own Dan Shine. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer. Thanks to our own Urvach Karkaria for his reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on Volkswagen's restructuring, Infinity's product comeback, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our own Larry Velaquette and Michael Martinez discuss the biggest news from the past week, including Toyota's Texas-sized plant investment.
We are getting more U.S. productions, 2,000 jobs for that complex down there, that it's going to now be among the largest plants in North America.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.